priorities wrong on what exactly they should be focusing on at this particular moment, especially a month after, a new cabinet was put up in place. So we'll be having a conversation around that. What is ailing the country at the moment? We've got the teachers' strike, the CUPES teachers' strike. We've got a university funding model dilemma and much more really that is ailing this country. And so we'll be having a conversation around that and what needs to be done better, especially for political leaders, just to ensure that, at least Kenyans are not frustrated in ways than one. So we'll be having a conversation around that. Your feedback is highly welcomed across our feedback lines this morning. The SMS feedback line is 23059. We are live across all streaming platforms on EBN TV this morning. The hashtag on X is #MorningLive. You can tag us at TVEBN, or you can tag me as well at It's Nanjala. So we'd love to hear your views this morning, your expectations as well, and much more on this show. So how about I get you started with what is making headlines across the country? You are in safe pair of hands. My name is Cynthia Nanjala. Now we begin off with some terrific news where 12 people died Saturday night after the vehicle they were traveling in collided head-on with another vehicle at Nithi Bridge. Families of some of those affected narrated their last moments with their loved ones. And the 12 were among a group of 21 people who had traveled to Meru for a Chama meeting. A member of the group narrated what happened, and addressing the press at the scene, Tharaka Nithi County Police Commander Zacchaeus Ngeno confirmed that the 12 passengers were returning from a parental blessing ceremony in Meru. According to the commander, the driver was not well versed with the highway and was driving on the wrong lane when the crash occurred.
Friday tulikuwa na Nigeria, kaniambia anaenda ngurupu huko Meru, walikuwa naenda mahali kunaitwa Kariene. Tukaachana na yeye kama wataenda the following day, wakaraukia asubuhi wakaenda huko Meru, wakaenda wakafanya occasion yao vizuri.
Tulipata ripoti saa 9 usiku kuna ajali inatokea huko Meru, na tukapata habari kuwa msichana wangu na mtoto wake waliaga pale, na sasa tuna shida kubwa.
So far we are confirming that we have collected 12 bodies from this scene, which and others 2 injured. This is an accident that has occurred involving 2 motor vehicles. One was headed towards the Nairobi direction and another one to Meru direction. So seemingly, or from the preliminary investigation, says that seemingly the motor vehicle that was coming from the Meru direction is not a motor vehicle that normally or regularly uses this road. And we may, or I may assume that the driver did not take to the lane as was expected of him, and had a head-on collision with the other vehicle that was coming from the Nairobi direction. Fatalities, as I've said, may confirm to be 12 of them. The combination, or in total, are 10 adults and 2 juveniles. The genders are 8 female and 2 male. So for the people who have been evacuated from here, we have 2 survivors. One has been taken to Chogoria Mission Hospital and another one to Chuka. But we are yet to confirm because we don't know how many passengers were in the van, in the van, or those who are in the pickup. So we are yet to confirm. We have sent to the hospital, but what we saw, or what was seen at the scene here.
Now, at the same time, leaders from Meru have called on the Deputy President to make good a promise the government made that it would work on the Nithi section to help reduce the accidents.
Ni mtu wa kusikiza ground, na ninakuomba leo ukitoka hapa, sikiza ground tafadhali. Uone vile bridge ya Tharaka Nithi inaendelea kuua watu wetu. Sikiza ground, we have lost 12 human beings last night, and I know the designs of that bridge are ready somewhere. Excellency sir, ukifikiria kwa ndoto yako ukiamuka, tutafutie namna na njia ya kuhakikisha hiyo bridge yetu isiwe watu wetu tena. Tumelia ya kutosha.
Those beautiful ladies who passed away last night wanatoka Meru County. This bridge is serving the entire region. Your Excellency, sir, let us keep the promise. Let us implement the designed new bridge of Nithi Bridge posterity.
Mambo ya Nithi Bridge, it is true. Tuliahidi. I have called the PS, ile mumeona nimetoka nje, Engineer Mbogwa kutaka kujua hiyo ahadi rais wetu alipeana. Nimemwambia kumekuwa na ajali last night. 12 people are dead, others are injured. I'm here in Meru. Emotions are very high. People are asking, they want an answer. He has told me that the designs are almost complete. Nimemwambia siharakishwe haraka. So that we come and honor that promise to the people of Meru and save lives. Na hiyo bridge inasaidia watu ya Tharaka Nithi, watu ya Meru, watu ya Embu, and all of us. Now we have lost very many lives kwa hiyo area.
Now, a fire broke out in Ngara area of Nairobi County after a gas station reportedly exploded in the wee hours of Sunday. Witnesses shared video clips of the blaze burning down buildings along the side road. It is, however, unclear if any fatalities were recorded during the incident. The value of damage is also yet to be determined. The explosion comes just days after a mysterious fire razed down property of unknown value at a furniture shop located in the Kasarani area along the Thika Superhighway.
Mi tunaishi na marafiki wangu watatu. So like kuna mmoja anakula miraa hakuwa amelala. So like hiyo masaa kufika, unajua ikilipuka ilikuwa inalipuka, unasikia nyumba ikitingika. So akatuamsha akatuambia, "Brayo amkeni, nikaa kuna lipuka." Hapa hiyo hoteli yenye iko nyuma yako ukiangalia moto ilianzia hapo. Moto kuanzia hapo, hapa hii ground yenye tumesimama, hapa kulikuwa kumewekwa stock ya gas.
Sasa huyo mtu kama ameasha gasi hakujua kama pengine inatoa hiyo oxygen ya inaweza leta madhara, kwa sababu yeye kukuja sasa kuasha, hata ni bahati mzuri kuchoma yeye, kwa sababu amekimbia after hiyo moto kuwa kwa hewa akakimbia.
Hakuna kitu nimewekea, kitanda zimechomeka, kila kitu imechomeka. Juu watoto walikuwa ndani na ungeweza kuingia hapa, moshi ilikuwa already huku ndani, ungeweza ingia. Watupe ID, wasitulipishe, watupe tu ID kama as a original ID. And with the other documents, vitu zote za masomo zilikuwa hapa, kila kitu ilikuwa hapa.
Nimepigiwa simu nikaambiwa moto imekuwa mingi, nikakuja tu nikakuta vile moto inawaka, lakini isingeweza kukaribia juu kulikuwa na mlipuko wa gasi.
Tuseme mafriji, maziwa ilikuwa pia hiyo lazima imeisha. Ndani kwa dhamana stock na machine, tuseme hapa million.
Sijui chochote cha kufanya, sasa nimekuja hapa nimekaa tu hivi. Moto umechoma kila kitu.
Ishele hapa moto ingeshika hii makontena na maana tungepoteza mali nyingi za Wakenya. Lakini wanakuja kwa kuchelewa. Sasa tungesema hapa ni vijijini sawa, lakini hapa ni katikati ya mji. Hapa kila mtu yuko hapa, watu sijui ni kuambeje madamu, lakini tuna hasara pesa mingi sana hapa. Tuangalie tu vile tutasaidiwa.
The top decision-making organ of the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers, KUPPET, has resolved that its members would carry on with their strike until further notice and until their Employer Teacher Service Commission promotes teachers who have stagnated in various job groups. The National Governing Council said the job boycott, which enters its second week today, would be intensified until their demands are met by the TSC. He accused the TSC and the government of failing to address the plight of teachers as the union vowed to fight what it termed as quote-unquote a systemic failure to recognize and reward the professionalism of Kenyan teachers.
The employer has refused to elevate the teacher. And this is what we must say. KUPPET power. I must say this. This is not a laughing matter. This is not a laughing matter. I must say this. If employers are going to choose not to respect the Minister for Labor, then that ministry should be scrapped. and the minister should go home.
Yes.
Corporate power. I'm telling you this for free. That is the reason for which this morning, this National Governing Council, which was called to review the status of the strike, have reported positively that the schools are not running and they are not going to run.
Yes.
Corporate power. For the next 1 week.
Yes.
Even beyond.
Yes.
The teachers this time have vowed to stay at home.
Yes.
They have vowed to stay at home.
Yes.
We are only now appealing to those principals who have been persuaded by wrong notions to let the schools not to be burnt. Because our teachers in post-primary are leading a very vulnerable group. You cannot keep students in school with teachers who are casuals. You cannot. You cannot. You cannot. The teachers who are known and who are qualified and competent to handle these students are the ones who know. So the parents who are risking the continued stay of their children in school, Coopet is not responsible.
Yes.
We are not responsible. We are not. Yes. We are not responsible.
Yes.
And therefore, we appreciate the primary school teachers who have joined the struggle, and therefore asking parents and principals to do due diligence not to engage in this mischievous arrangement of the Teacher Service Commission.
Now, leaders from different regions have hailed the decision by President William Ruto to form a government of national unity, saying this was a touch of genius. The leaders say the move had brought unity into the country, which was almost going over the precipice. At the same time, they urged him not to be moved or intimidated by other leaders who have been going around selling their political agendas. The president also said that those preaching politics of tribalism will not succeed.
Mimi kama chairman ya region hii nataka kuelezea wewe ya kwamba tumeamua region yote mzima tunatembea tukiongea na wananchi, na nataka kushukuru wananchi hawa wote wamekubali ya kwamba tuungane. Na wewe rais, tunakushukuru kwa kuunganisha Kenya hii. Mambo ya broad-based government, rais hapo ndio liangalia na ukaamua ya kwamba Kenya lazima iungane, mambo ya ukabila na vyama ipotee.
Mheshimiwa Rais, nataka nikuambie leo tukiwa hapa Bungoma, usikubali kiongozi yeyote wakati wewe unaongea mambo ya umoja wa wananchi wa Kenya, mwingine aongee mambo ya kutenganisha wananchi wa Kenya. Usikubali, na usikubali kuuziwa uoga ya kuwa kuna kiongozi mwenye anaweza mobilize eneo moja ama nyingine ataitenge na Wakenya wengine.
Sisi tumeshukuru rais wetu kwa kaunti kuunganisha kaunti 47. Ndio unajua ekonomi ya Kenya ni mambo ya wale watu wanajua mambo ya kilimo, majani, kahawa, makandamia, miwa na vitu zile zingine.
Nyinyi wana Bungoma mlihusika pakubwa kwa kubuni serikali hii. Sisi wale ambao tumetoloka zile sehemu za mbali tulikuwa tumeona ruwaza ya mheshimiwa rais na tukamuunga pasi na kujali ukabila wala dini. Na sasa nyinyi wana Bungoma nanyi mkaingia kwenye meli hiyo. Hivi leo rais anaunganisha Kenya nzima, na sisi wote tuko nyuma ya rais anaposhikanisha Kenya yetu iwe Kenya moja chini ya rais moja, ndio tuweze kufanya maendeleo kwa kona zote za Kenya.
Sisi tumekuja tu hapa kukuhakikishia tunakuunga mkono unapotengeneza serikali ya wananchi wote.
Endelea kushikanisha Kenya. Usiuziwe uoga na mtu. Wewe ni rais wa Kenya mzima. Kabila zote ni zako. Zilete pamoja, tukue na Kenya moja, maendeleo ikue moja na kila mtu asaidike.
All right, so let's talk Matters newspaper. We'll kick it off with the Daily Nation just to see what is making headlines this Monday morning. So, World Bank, IMF hit back. World Bank and the IMF International Monetary Fund hit back. Odious debt, is it? The World Bank and the IMF have for the first time confronted damning accusations of reckless lending to Kenya, even as their rebuttals are disputed by audits and budget reports. Now, that story, is on page 2 and 3 of the Daily Nation this morning. Now, let's take a look at the debt burden and where we are as of now. Now, 11 years ago, that is 2013, the public debt was at 1.8 trillion shillings. Now, as of June 2023, the public debt is at 10.27 trillion shillings. In fact, I remember during the month of June, in the run-up to the finance bill, the National Treasury had put that debt ceiling at 11.4 trillion shillings. So the debt burden, keeps on rising in the country. If you look at the trajectory, just from about 11 years ago to now, and where we are from 1.8 trillion shillings as a debt burden to 11.4 trillion shillings as of June 2024. So that's the trajectory. Now, the center of it has been accusations from various public, sector holders, shareholders as well, who have said, the World Bank and the IMF keep on giving us loans on high interest rates. And that means at the end of the day, Kenyans are the ones that bear the biggest burden in terms of debt repayment, because we're on a cycle in the country's economy where we have budgets that we're supposed to fund. There's a deficit. How do we now fund that deficit? Through loans. In events where as well, if you look at, for instance, 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic and the loan that Kenya had to take just to be able to, to make it like a stimulus package in various sectors. And so who always do we turn to? Well, largely it has been the World Bank and the IMF. Now, that is a story that is on page 2 and 3 of the Daily Nation this morning that speaks of World Bank, IMF confront Kenya's debt heist claims. Now, at a time when Kenya is battling a 10.5 trillion shillings debt as of 2023, but I'll put it at 11.4 as of 2024, and reports of hundreds of billion shillings in borrowed money that can't be traced to any project. Indeed, or in candid response to the nation, the Bretton Woods Institution addressed concerns about the cost and legitimacy of the loans. Busia Senator Okiya Omtata and Safina Party leader Jimmy Wanjigi have publicly stated Kenya has overpaid its debt obligation by over 1 trillion shillings, according to the revenue books of the government. And Wanjigi has claimed Kenya should not repay odious debt that he claims was never spent on development in accordance with the laws. The AG and the Controller of Budget have also questioned the true cost of concessional loans, with the rising calls for a transparent forensic audit of the country's debt. Now, that has been the biggest task for a lot of Treasury CSs that have come into office, and the demand for them to make Kenya's public debt public to the people, for the people to be able to go through these debts and understand this money that was borrowed either from the World Bank or the IMF that was supposed to go into a certain project. Did it actually go through that project? And what is the period at which you're supposed to pay the loan? What is the interest rate of that particular loan? What are some of the conditions that have been placed on that particular loan, as has been the norm with the IMF, who have more often than not put conditions on loans that they are able to give to Kenya? So those are some of the key questions that are being asked as we speak, and on whether or not Kenya is actually just paying loans, off on projects that never really matured in Kenya. So by end of April, Kenya owed the two multilateral lenders a combined 1.9 trillion shillings. That is both the IMF and the World Bank. Now, 1.9 trillion shillings is a huge figure, putting into consideration, for instance, the budget estimates for the 2024-2025 was at 3.9 trillion shillings. So out of this 3.9, if we were to dutifully pay the loans off, then we'll remain with just 2.0 trillion shillings. And that means 1.9 trillion shillings is money that would have gone into, development, money that would have gone into recurrent expenditure, money that would have gone into the county government. And so there's a bigger picture in place here on whether or not we are paying off loans that actually exist and whether or not they are correctly numbered. So that is the headline this morning, even as the World Bank has responded to the debt haste claims. And, for instance, Kenya owes the World Bank 1.5 trillion. And currently there are 36 ongoing projects funded by the lender valued at more than 950 billion shillings. Now it says prior to approving the loans, it undertakes a comprehensive appraisal to assess a project's feasibility and readiness of an entity to implement it. Now, for instance, we've got the last mile electricity connectivity, which is being funded by the World Bank. You've got the Kenya Youth Employment and Opportunities Project, which is also being funded. You've got project underfunding and cancellations, which is also being funded. So there are so many ways you look at it on whether or not, the World Bank is telling the truth or the IMF is telling the truth, but it all goes back to the basics of is Kenya or the general public able to get an audit of the public debt, and it is made public who we owe, what we owe them, for how long do we owe them for, or what is at least the agreements that have been put up in place, and that will be able to assure accountability and transparently in Kenya. Also, top of the page, Kuppet digs in on strike as it demands teachers promotion. The teacher strike enters now week 2. Kuppet says they're still on the streets. NATOF obviously halted their protests last week. Also, Israel a double agent in Gachagwa's Nyanza popularity. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has stirred political waters by making a strong show when he accompanied President William Ruto in the just concluded tour of the region. And there's this phrase that he has very much used on his tour. And he says, Mimi ni Rigiji, I'm the guy from Lima, And so Israel a double agent in the DP Gachagwa's Nyanza popularity. Now, it remains to be seen why this headline and just what they're measuring popularity based on. Is it based on the cheers that were coming in as he was speaking? Is it based on perhaps a poll that was done? So Israel a double agent in DP Gachagwa's Nyanza popularity. That is the headline, one of the headlines on the pages. From surviving an impeachment threat to budget cuts, DP turning into a master of comebacks. Gachagua has persistently been painted by critics as an isolationist who only cares about Mount Kenya interests. However, this weekend, or at least for the from Wednesday to Saturday, those are 4 days, he accompanied President William Ruto on that tour of the Nyanza region. So we'll also be taking a look into that as well. Then now to the Standard, top of the page, misplaced priorities. Misplaced priorities. Tough days. The country faces a myriad of problems, from the teachers' strike that is threatening to derail secondary school national examinations to a jittery Gen Z youth who are calling for good governance to the imminent threat from the Mpox disease. However, the president and his executive are busy politicking. And that is a headline that is on page 2 and 3 of the Standard newspaper this morning that speaks of country in crisis mode, education, health, economy in dire straits. On the other hand, Raila's base happy. Gen Z demands on back banner. Now, arguably, you'd say for the last 2 weeks, it has been quite heavy politically for Kenya, perhaps with the entrance of new persons into the cabinet, the homecoming ceremonies of the persons that have been nominated or were appointed into cabinet. And then now look at, on the other hand, the country in itself, how we are doing or how we are faring on a teacher's strike, a university funding dilemma. You've also got, in matters health, the Mpox disease, which is turning out to be something of a worrying cause, if you may call it, as well as, the economy in itself, are Kenyans, feeling satisfied with just how the economy is being pushed at the moment? Is food cheaper? Is the cost of electricity cheaper? Is the cost of bus fare as you go to work cheaper? Has it increased? What is the situation in the country? So misplaced priorities. We'll be having also an in-depth conversation around that, on whether we are back to politicking, as is always the norm, particularly after June 25th. Also top of the page, opinion split on Kalonzo's role as opposition head. Opinion split on Kalonzo's role as opposition head. We've seen Azimio coalition, members from, ODM party who say they're still in Azimio, to the Wiper members who are insisting Kalonzo should now be the de facto opposition leader. To the likes of Jubilee's SG, Jeremiah Kioni, who have seemingly sided with Kalonzo Musyoka. Talk about DAPK's Eugene Wamalo, who seemingly sided with Kalonzo Musyoka. So opinion is split on Kalonzo's role as opposition head. Does he have the political stature to keep President William Ruto in tows in the run-up to at least 3 years before the 2027 elections? And so those are the headlines this morning on the Standard newspaper as well. Misplaced priorities, opinion split on Kalonzo's role. We'll be having in-depth conversations around this as well. So those are your papers this morning. All right, allow us to take a quick breather. When we come back, we'll be getting into the conversation around the state of the nation. It's been 14 years since we promulgated the 2010 Constitution. Now, for the better part of last week, we were speaking about, the Katiba Day and just the gains made through this particular Constitution, the hits and the misses as well, the 2010 Constitution. Is it about time that we can speak about, going back to a referendum and improving or at least changing some of the amendments within this Constitution in terms of, it has been accused of, promoting largely to the huge public wage bill in the country, as well as this politics of the winner takes all, which keeps on taking us back to handshake talk. So we'll be having a conversation around that, as well as this headline on misplaced priorities in Kenya at a time when when teachers are on strike, at a time when the university funding people are still against it, at a time when food security is still an issue. Is this the best time for us to be having homecoming ceremonies and the politics around that? So that conversation returns in a bit. Your feedback is highly welcomed across our feedback lines. Please do talk to us. We'll be able to sample your feedback before we conclude. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly. And the two issues that we'll be able to tackle, that includes the 2010 Constitution in itself, because it's been 14 years. Last week we marked 14 years since the promulgation of the Constitution, but so much has developed within that week that still takes us back to this particular book or, amendments that govern us Kenya as a rule of law country. We'll look at the gains made, what can be changed, because so much has been accused around this particular Constitution, and that is why we had the BBI debate to go back to the referendum. That's why we also had a conversations around the NADCO report. Some of the tenets that were to be changed will require a referendum. So we'd love to have a conversation around this just to understand where we are as a country. Have we been able to successfully deal with the ethnic divisions that have been witnessed in the country? Are we back to tribal politics? Something interesting developed, keeps on developing actually for the better part of last week and this week, and that is on social media, and there are tribal lines that were drawn. So Kenya still grapples with ethnic divisions. Kenya still grapples with economic inequality. Is this something that is based within the Constitution and can be changed? And how do we better ourselves as a nation? putting in mind that constitutionally we're allowed to change the constitution if it has been, in place for a minimum of 8 years, and 8 years is already done because we're talking about 14, and so that means whoever has got that power to be able to change that constitution now is you, because it's a people-powered book, or it's a people-powered constitution. We'll also have conversations around this headline on the Standard newspaper this morning that speaks of misplaced priorities, because Kenya is grappling with education issues, health issues, economic issues, but what we have seen for the past 2 weeks, if it's anything to go by, is the politics around it and the talks of whether or not there's opposition in place, and yet we still have people who cannot afford to pay for health insurance. The SHIF cannot afford to put meal on their table. So there's so much really that we'll be able to dive into this morning. Your feedback is highly welcomed across our feedback lines 23059. Please do talk to us. Tell us where you're watching us from. Questions, thoughts, comments perhaps that you may have concerning this. Let me introduce my guest in studio. I'm joined by Mwito Mureithi, who's a political analyst and commentator. Asante sana Mwito. Good morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good to have you.
Me too.
Right, so let's kick it off with this particular constitution of ours, 14 years in the making. And it is a constitution that introduced devolution in the country. It's a constitution that begins with Article 1, which is giving power to the people. 14 years later, from where you sit, Mwito, has it propelled Kenya towards the right direction?
Well, just before I get into it, I wish to express my sincere condolences to the bereaved families that lost their loved ones of the accident that took place at the famous Tharaka Bridge. And I believe this is going to be a wake-up call for the Ministry of Roads too.
Right. Allow me to just interject. I'm being informed we have an issue with your microphone. But we'll be getting back to that in just a bit. But yes, just an update on the Nithi Bridge, where 12 people succumbed to that particular accident, which occurred on Saturday night. And the issue continues to develop, even as residents are calling on the government to be able to fast-track changes to it, putting in mind that this is not the first. But I'm being informed we have you back, so please proceed.
Yes, it was about my condolences to the bereaved families and over the Tharaka Nithi accident. That has been a place that has been a black spot for so many years, and I do believe that ever since the third regime, there had been promises to have this bridge, done properly and also expanded, and many other things to take place that would be structurally ideal. I hope that this is going to happen now with this kind of thing that has taken place.
Yeah.
Concerning, regarding the Constitution, this was a step in the right direction, having started the clamor, especially after 1991 multi-party, which gave Kenyans the voice to begin to agitate for things they needed changed, other things they felt needed to be changed in our Constitution. And so towards late millennium, around 1999, 2000, there was need, and the formation of the Bomas draft, the Bomas team came around, which was a representation of Kenyans themselves, from the village all the way to the top, represented in Parliament, in Bomas, to draft a constitution that befitted all the communities in Kenya, because before then we were working around and living within a constitution that was granted to us at the Lancaster in 1957, which really was not our constitution. But having had an elite clout of Kenyans in terms of legal understanding, and Kenyans who have also lived under such oppressive constitution of the past, there was need for us to have this change. And so we started with the Bomas and came into the Kiplagat Commission, which I participated broadly because I did my submissions. Also joined in the civic education for the 2010 Constitution under the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, personally, in charge of Meru and Nyeri for the youth agenda in the Constitution. And so it came around when, at a time when really it was needful. And the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution came at the right time. Unfortunately,
yes.
The principal tenets heeded to towards the formation of the Committee of Eminence really did not really allow Kenyans to speak for themselves fully, did not accommodate what really Kenyans wanted fully, because much of what was highlighted was what was actually to the whims of the West, and especially the Americans. And the people who voted no, I included, not that I didn't like some of these things that were done. I was saying, why jeopardize the future by putting us into certain, loggerheads unnecessarily when we can correct it right now? The issue of creation of counties, had they gone by the principle of them just being authorities under the national government, because people to date have not understood that the national government and the county government, these are not two governments with equal power. But for it to make sense to any governor, they call it my government. And when you hear a governor talking of his government, that is his county government, my government, and the president talks about his government as my government, the Kenyan who is not well enlightened on these matters, yet is a voter, yet is a participant on national political issues, gets confused. And if they had not used the principles of, establishing or setting up a federal state, they would have used what would have been principles which would have been used for that, amending a bit of what was used, the rules and regulation and laws that were used in making our local governments that we had, local authorities. Yeah. That is what it would have continued to become, but make some amendments here and there. But when you took the principle of giving it the autonomous powers granted to federal states, like in the US, the splitting of the small country, as we said then, the size of the state of California, split 47 times. And the people who are advising you to split 47 times, they have their state of California, the size of Kenya, intact as one, with a smaller population than the one Kenya has. It really bothered some of us who said, no, we need to sit back and do what we said in 2006, right, after the Constitution, the one that failed. That it's time we make a constitution for the 45 tribes. Because when you're advised by somebody who is facing racial challenges in America to tell you that you are on the wrong, in the wrong place when you stand up as a Luya who is a Kenyan, or as a Kikuyu who is a Kenyan, and we always agitated for this. It's only for me to make up my mind and love you and respect you for who you are. And we continue living as we had lived before the 2010 Constitution.
Yes.
But this thing of tribalism is because we have never, and even the media itself is not really assisting in highlighting that we have negative and positive tribalism. So when we talk about tribal politics in Kenya, it will never end, because ending tribal politics is ending culture.
Right, so, and we'll come to that in just a bit. Before we come to the tribal politics, because the common mwananchi may not be able to understand what exactly tribal politics is, so we'll come to that in just a bit. But I'll go back to the issue of the counties, as you've been able to put it up. We've got 47 counties, and this has been one of the large sticky issues of the Constitution, the fact that, it's 47 counties, you've got 47 governors, you've got 47 senators, you have 47 women representatives, put in the deputy governors as well, who are 47 of them. And there has been an allurement that this was not necessary because it further pressures the public wage bill in the country. And if you listen to some of the leaders and what they have said, they would prefer a constitution that will size down in the number of counties to actually regions, to having just 8 regions, cutting down on some of these positions, which they say, is not really being executed very much well. What is your view on that?
Before then, when we had provinces, we still coexisted as several communities within a certain block. So the issue of having every community having its own county, it was the worst way of promoting tribalism. The No people said so, and we still stand on that. Today we are saying it. But what happened? There was a lot of trade, which you may not understand, between people who were spearheading campaigns towards or for such a constitution that let this thing go as it is. It was not really for the interest of Kenyans. We had all the time. It was the 10th year since we started working on a new constitution. When it came to the 2010, there was a lot that went on, touching on certain areas like, the judiciary with the subordinate courts, whatever elevation of a council of elder of a certain religious bloc, that is Islam, and leaving these others who would have used the Bible or any other whatever. We had said, let's all subject ourselves to the secular law that we have. Unlike having such a thing, is something that right now, if you touch it, it's a very dicey thing. You cannot really correct that one with ease. Coming to the counties, the block of Eastern Province, which is Northeastern Province, which was majority Muslim, splitting it into now Borana, Rendile, whoever, Gabra, wherever, they get their own counties. It was the worst way of dealing with it, and that's how come we ended up with over 40 counties, which was wrong. We would have sought for ways, but since people were fighting against Moi, they decided everything that was actually in existence when Moi was the president, let's do away with it, let's introduce a new one. And the people of the West, the governments of the West, they saw this as an issue, and so they capitalized on it. And that's why even the wage bill we are discussing, even with the IMF, we are borrowing because when the president sits at State House, he's expecting 47 calls to respond to 47 calls every morning, because those are the needs of Kenyans. Now we split the needs of Kenyans into tribal, yet we are fighting the tribal thing. That was the hypocrisy that was there in the constitution. I know many people had not seen it that way, but this is the reality. The constitution, having it the way it is, it needs to be amended.
Right.
And amended seriously. And thank God for now the awakening of our young people who are able to read. And like I said in 2006, while I was being shut down by Mr. Kiplagat, thinking that the fact that I deliberately, I was working by that time, I was working for Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. If I said I'm a journalist, he would have listened to me. But when I used my other, facet of life and indicated there, I'm a plumber, it caused problems. But I'm the one who told them it's time to make a constitution for Kenya, for Kenyans that is Kenyan.
So you do agree the number of public officers within the country should be cut down?
Should be cut down drastically. And also immediately. Yeah. If there were any openings in the constitution to actually do away with these kind of things, it's time we start doing this right away. But remember, there are cartels in government who benefit from this. When you have these duplicated services, duplicated organs of the government, some certain parastatals that do the same thing, something that can be handled by a certain department is granted by. If you tell Kenyan to produce and distribute, It can do that. We don't need KPLC to remain as it is wholly. Alternatively, what we have always spoken about, having KPLC being denied or kind of
as a monopoly.
When we remove that monopoly thing on the KPLC, then introduce other companies to do the distribution, then definitely Kenyans will begin to experience what they need to experience, what they ought to experience.
Right.
Secondly, I believe once the constitution is looked into, there are various things that went positive, especially on matters governance. There was this freedom that we are enjoying even right now to scrutinize even the constitution and affairs of the government freely. Vis-a-vis changes that have been brought about by the development in the digital platform. That transformation has really created a platform where Kenyans and people in Africa are able now to, criticize and maybe also uphold what is good in their own native country. So, like in Kenya, there is a lot that goes on in terms of constitutional challenges that we're experiencing. And if we would use the social platforms properly and effectively, I think with what awakening that came about with the finance bill, let's enhance, and that's why we're encouraging that. Let's get the interest of understanding even what the constitution is all about, so that when we're challenging it with this understanding. So in terms of governance, there were lots of good things that came about. Economic changes, how to manage public resources. There is just a small hitch, but there are a lot changed from what used to be run from State House of Atley, because it was never an issue of it's a responsibility of the CBK governor or a minister for finance or a department of finance in the government. It was about what the president wanted. And that's what carried the day. That was the politics of that time. So this is no longer the thing. We established institutions that really manage our public resources. And I believe when it comes to transparency, it's a behavioral thing, which I believe if the laws at the judiciary, if they can be strengthened, and also the challenge at the judiciary, where we also experience lots of corruption. If the laws are well implemented by the judiciary, then I do believe that there would be instilled fear, which would actually cause Kenyans to change their mentality, because some behavioral things, those ones can only be changed if we cause a certain conviction. So we made good the economic, the political and economic segment of the constitution, but we sacrificed rather the social. And when you get into looking into the social, you'll be so shocked. There are so many things that we need to do.
And I'll stick on that a bit, because something interesting has been happening online, especially for last week. I still saw it yesterday. And there's a lot of ethnic divisions. And this was based largely on the trip that President William Ruto took to Nyanza region, where he was very much welcomed and, just cheered by the people. I don't know if that really measures the quantity of whether a region loves a particular person or not, but the ethnic lines were drawn, especially with that sort of welcome. And there was a, larger blame finger on a particular tribe, and just, this instant reaction and the change that has been witnessed in the country. And, you earlier mentioned about tribal politics was very much propelled in terms of, especially with the distribution and the devolution that came up in place. But Mwito, does the common Mwananchi really understand what tribal politics is, and what exactly is it? Or do we tend to just, dismiss it as it's just politics?
Who is a common Mwananchi? Common. We are all common Mwananchi. As long as we are all common Kenyans, we are all common Mwananchis. But this insult, we are special, we are better, we understand things better than you, that's the biggest mistake that Kenyans do. In politics, we have those who are elected and those who elect. Okay? We have the voters and those who are voted in. When it comes to politics, anyone who goes to vie, he has his own interest, and for his interest to be magnified, he carries his family, he carries his community, he carries his region. Okay? And there is no better way of doing it. Ask any strategist, ask any political scientist, ask them a better way, a better option of dealing with it if you don't start from where you actually sit in your own house. That this is what I'm thinking of doing. Then the community which is around you, then the community supports you and takes you to the next level. You begin to think as a constituency. You begin to think as a region. You must think as a region. Hypocrisy is worse than witchcraft. And that is what Kenyans are practicing through the media.
We always seem to bear the biggest brunt of
the media is the one that has the most amplified instrument that can reach every Kenyan. So I have to hit out on media. Why do we have to hype negative things? When we know too well, if I positively handle my origin factors properly, like see it from the positive side, what are the positive things about belonging to community A and belonging to community B? There is nothing negative about belonging to any or either community. But the reasons I grant myself, advised by my own self, is what really determines how I should behave with somebody from another community. They have their own culture, they have their own language, they have their own traditions, they have their own faith. You understand? Joining their faith is an option. Learning to speak their language is an option because I have to learn it. You know, adapting their culture and tradition is an option. So when something is an option, it means I can choose to ignore it or uphold it or adapt it. Now, when Kenyans through the media begin to talk about, oh, it's wrong to do like this, I listened to them yesterday and I've been listening to them and I've been hitting at this every time. One stands from Mount Kenya and says, those peddling tribal politics. Then another one from Western Kenya says, sisi kama watu wa eneo hili, la Western Kenya, tunaunga serikali yako mkono, tunataka iwe hivyo, blah, blah, blah. And that's what they say. He spoke like a Western Kenyan person. What's the problem? It's good, because the president did not go to Western Kenya to visit the Maasais. He did not go to vote for Maasai vote or to canvass for Maasai support in Luhyaland or Luoland or Kikuyu support in Northeastern. You go to where that region has got a majority. And even with the constitution itself, for information, the counties actually have a right to make rules and laws that actually go with the majority of the natives, the residents of that county, So if they share common culture, most of the things that you're going to look at, they're actually advised by their cultural stand and this kind of thing. So when we try to say that we are avoiding this, and we have it even in our constitution, in the principles that will guide the formation of, the legislation of a county, then I think we are big hypocrites. And that's what I'm saying. Hypocrisy is worse than witchcraft. And that is what Kenyans are practicing daily. We need to get out of this. It's time we do numerous amendments to this thing. But the biggest amendment, the greatest amendment that should take place is up here and in here. So if Kenyans don't change in their minds and in their heart, then it is in the heart that there is love. It's in the mind that I'm there to evaluate, know, scrutinize, analyze, see, understand. If you cannot fathom why I am like this, then I would not really explain myself or express myself. So I should understand myself first. And that's why I'm saying Kenyans should understand themselves. But look at how we have actually opened ourselves up for the West to advise us. It's amazing that even in
the headline,
yes, we are saying the IMF is giving us loans. Loans, you don't have to go for it. It's an option. Why do you have to go to the IMF or World Bank?
Actually, remember John Buddy, the CS, says, it is not IMF that comes to us, it's Kenya that goes to the IMF. Yeah.
You get the point. And when it comes to accountability and transparency, you don't want us to touch that area. They don't want us to touch that area. What have you done with our money? And we'll get to that. But this is why I'm saying that now about the Constitution, that I think there are several amendments that need to be done. We need to check Article 170. It's going to be a tricky one, which hands the Islam community contrary to Chapter 4 of the Bill of Rights. When you say all Kenyans are equal, or we have what we call equity, and we are equal, then you elevate one than the other, or you give one some certain autonomous rights socially, and the others are subjected to the rude laws of the secular. That's the discrimination of the highest degree, and it's going to be very hard to deal with it. But while we were doing it with that committee that was doing it, that was working on it at the KICC, there were these trades that started at the bombers. Vote for this, we will support you on this. Support this, we will support this. Remember, I will spark a debate when I say the Abuja Declaration of 1989 was so in play of the Kenyan Constitution, in the making of the Kenyan Constitution, which the religion had to come in because there was a certain negative, perception of Islam community here and outside the world. Because it was at the height of what they were calling terrorism and many other things that were associated with the community. But this was then 2010 and before. So, 1989 and before. So the Abuja Declaration was be friendly, enter into these countries, especially countries like Kenya, via the Constitution. It's not only Kenya, even the US and wherever, they're coming in by the Constitution, which is good. But again, now when you say that a certain religion has got its own bank that is following the Quran, which is not which is not a advising principle, principle to the central bank. The central bank is advised by the laws granted to it by the Constitution.
Right.
And then here we are. We actually have a fully fledged Islamic Bank of Kenya. Let alone a bank account, the Hawala accounts that were introduced during the third regime. We now have the Islamic Bank of Kenya, but you must be, to open an account, you must be an Islamic adherent. So what does it tell you? If I'm a Christian, profess Christianity, then I have no space for that one, because it's all about anyone who professes Islam.
Right.
That's discrimination. So how are you going to deal with that? We allowed it in the Constitution. When we were saying no, let's sit back, please, with sobriety and address these issues. It has had an economic impact, which everybody else is feeling it, because from the book of Leviticus, we have the borrowing pattern, which also applies more on the Islam pattern. Had we gone for that one also, we would be experiencing this. But what happens to the Indians, the Hindus, who are now a 45th community, tribe in Kenya? What happens to other communities that are cultural and they don't believe in either Christianity or wherever? Then at that point, we need to have a very sober discussion. Secondly, I have no issues with Islam, but I have to mention these are things we brought about, and personally I agitated for it. And I'll tell you this: the 9 counties that fall on the eastern side of our country are all majority Muslim. Okay, and while we were talking about the marginalized communities to get lots of funding because they were marginalized, we did not set a threshold that when we get to this level, then we will consider you able to carry on by yourself. Now, this is what is happening today. Children from those regions complete high school. We have the NGCDF, we have the NGAF, we have the counties, bursaries and whatever. Funding the students, children to go to other counties. Not build schools, better schools in Northeastern. No, don't build schools. Take them to Meru, take them to Mount Kenya, take them to Nyanza and other places. Let them obtain quality education. Then go invest in Nairobi. So what happens to the 13 billion that goes to a county that has no infrastructure, has no schools, has no population, has no sizable population that would be addressed with 13 billion? Then with no returns actually, or own revenue collection, with no own revenue collection, because all the 9 counties from the other side, the eastern side, actually, if they remit much, it must be around 100 million or 200 million maximum. While a county in Mount Kenya region is actually remitting 1.5 billion shillings. That is own revenue collection. Then receives 6 billion shillings from the government, or 7. You understand the discrepancy? Yeah. That is what should be addressed. But how should you address it? We must set a threshold. We must set rules that will force those counties to improve on the infrastructure and the population. Now, a child from the eastern province, northeastern province, can get a bursary of 100,000, 200,000, while a child from Mount Kenya gets 2,000 shillings, 5,000 shillings maximum. Okay? And that's why the introduction of the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote would actually equalize, because it's only the number of children who are in school that get the support. 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote. It's actually going to enable the number of the residents of that community, or whichever community in whichever region, to benefit singly. And this is why the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote is something that every Kenyan should actually embrace. But it would not really be a walk in the park in the regions that I've mentioned, and that includes the less populated, the not densely populated areas. And that's why I'm saying that it's a debate that it's a serious debate. We need to sit down and soberly look into it. And if you're talking on expressing and demonstrating love for one another, if I know that I'm having a larger share than you in terms of that small meal that we are sharing, then I think it is there we come to searching our souls and see whether we need to let go some of the things that we hold on to, or how we're supposed to work it out. I think it's time that we get down to this kind of politics. But that actually would contribute to the amendments that we are talking about. I've only explained it broadly, but with what is happening currently.
But of course, that it's such an extensive conversation that needs to be had, because there's so much just around the constitution and various aspects, political, economic, and social as well. And so, last week was 14 years since the promulgation of the 2010 constitution. There have been talks of a referendum. We've seen it with the BBA report. We've seen it with the NADCO report. It is yet to be seen whether or not some of these talks will actually materialize and mature into actual referendum. And of course, a referendum, that means people have to go back and vote on a new constitution if they so wish, and if not, then they vote no. So that's something, of course, it's yet to be seen in the near future, and we'll see just how it pans out in the conversations around that. But I'd love us to switch to something that has been highlighted on top of the Standard. And Joe, if we could get that newspaper yet again on the Standard, just to see the headline, Misplaced Priorities, that speaks of, in the midst of economic issues, in the midst of education issues, in the midst of health issues, the president and his executive are busy politicking. And so that's the headline this morning on the Standard on Misplaced Priorities. Which I'd love to get your view, because we're coming on the backdrop of some 2 crucial months in Kenya's history. That was June and July, where we saw a lot of protests against the finance bill. We saw the protests against the government, and we saw the changes that the government has been able to make, from the dissolution of the cabinet, to a new cabinet that is in place, to some scrapping of I'd say funding to some of the key offices within the, the higher offices. And so we seem to be, we just had a brief moment of relief from the normal politics to issue-based, and then now we sort of now got back to where we were before June.
Well, like I said, and I always say, I don't hail the Gen Z uprising 100%, because we got to understand with them that much as we would fight, we need to understand some of these things in and out. And like we said, most of them admit, even the finance bill itself, they didn't understand it. Now we need to do that and educate our peers so we can be able now to have a very formidable force on these matters and make a lot of sense. However, the Gen Z uprising was a plus because it was an awakening that we need to look into certain issues in depth and we need to understand them. And that's why I'm saying much of what they brought about to us is awakening. You know, there are some of us who feared to speak, but now I think it has come to a point where we need to look at things in depth. But you cannot separate this from the politics of the moment because unifying a country, you cannot just unifying it with a statement with two flags behind you and say let's be united. There must be a campaign against it, and I'm calling it a campaign because it's a campaign. There was an opposition which now is not as strong as it were with the exit of Raila Odinga from the opposition. And the introduction of Raila Odinga's support for the sitting government, it means a sizable support of the opposition will actually now fall on the side of the government. Now, this jostling is real, and that's what I was saying with the Gen Zs. It's time we actually get it down into, registering as voters.
Did they lose their way?
No, who the Gen Zs?
Yes.
No, what the Gen Zs did is that there were lots of things, lots of gaps that needed to be filled up. This time round we need to come with a group that has leadership. But when you say you have no leadership, there is no nothing, that becomes a loophole, and that is what has been taken advantage of by politicians. And in any game, like now the political game that they're coming into the political whatever game, they must come in with a strategy, okay? And they cannot do it without a leadership. And the leadership must not be from the elderly, from the elders, but it must come from within them, okay? So they can be able to engage issues from the level of understanding, okay? So if they would organize themselves, and like we were advising them, it's time we get back and start. The starting point would be from their colleges, universities, and polytechnics. Unite, and then unite with those in the village. Because if you segregate them and assume that you're going to accomplish much, they might be also tapped by these other guys who are strategizing for their existence and thrival. They would actually target the ones you're neglecting, the villager who is in the Gen Z bracket. So I told the Gen Zs, they must sit down, and this is what we are discussing with them daily wherever we meet, that it's time they regroup themselves, have leaders. And the only problem is that they should know that those leaders they're going to put on the front are still compromisable, just like any other leader, any other human being who would actually go into placing a price tag.
Yeah.
And the most aggressive person does not really become the best of representatives, because some of these guys who talk loud are the ones who get bored so quickly, because it's a bargain. and that's what happens. So once they understand, this is the game, this is how it goes. So before I lose out and we are having our next replacement or elections to replace the team leader, then I must make sure that I make a kill out of it. And since there are things coming my way, I'll take advantage. And that's how politics is played. But if they come in and have a certain percentage of transformation they would like to implement, that's how you discuss as a group. We want to see changes here and there and there, but not everything to change abracadabra.
At once.
Yeah, so they need to be well advised on this.
Right, and if you look at some of the issues that have been highlighted, you've got issues in the education sector, KUPPET are striking, you've got the university funding model dilemma, which has been accused to be, what's the word I'd use, but it's really not sitting well with majority of students who are going to campus. Speak about the health sector. We had a doctor's strike recently that went for so long. The clinical officers have been threatening to still go back on the streets. Look at the economy. And it's just 3 years of Ruto's administration. Yes, some of these issues may stem back to the previous administration to which he was still part of, but what does this mean about his administration really? Has he been able to handle these issues very extensively well, especially with this year, with the doctor strike, the teachers strike, and various issues just around as well, the anti-government protests?
Well,
we're actually a striking nation, for lack of a better word.
We actually a striking nation.
Yeah.
We strike because of the misplaced priorities. That I agree. Because like now, if you look at, we could be having very beautiful plans.
Yes.
But to implement them, I think we needed to have a change of mindset, which is that this is the area that actually aids most. And once that mindset changes, then we'll be able to accomplish most of these things. If I look at the students, financial support thing, the help. Introduction of that evaluation thing with those bans that they brought about is not really going to work, because we have to agree and get to a point where we say, I don't have to view myself as a poor child or a rich child. Whatever is coming for the child, let it be helpful to the child and the child's education. By so doing, they would have increased the amount that is to be shared amongst students and ensure that this takes it to almost a free. But this being alone, they would have addressed issues of, the interest rate, especially for the students. Even after they come out, it remains a standard. Like maybe they're getting these loans and they pay it at a flat rate of 5%, regardless of the changes that take place thereafter, and it be legislated as so. Then that would really help our students and increase the funding. If it was 7 billion for the students, then make it 21 billion for the students. That becomes very easy. Now, when you have that capping of that interest rate, special interest rate for them, then it would work well. And like I was saying, the interest rate charged on the Islam bank loans was to be less if they go by the Quran. Is borrow and pay. So if it can work on a certain community in terms of religion, it would work also for the students. They would also introduce it and legislate for the sake of the students. Just equate, let it be affordable for every student who qualifies and gets enough to cater for whatever courses they are undertaking. And that would actually cause some bit of transformation. So when we having these kind of things addressed, the strikes that are coming up, we have the civil servants who also wanted to do their strike.
Yeah.
At the same time, I would not really fully support the strike by the teachers, because you see, if the government has come up and the economic challenges that the country could be facing, whether it's as a result of misappropriation and whatever, the reality is that if there is less money, there's less money. And 30 billion has been put on the table. I believe that was one of the reasons why NAT decided, let's go by the bit that we have been able to accomplish now. We still have next year, we have another day to strike or maybe to negotiate. And when KUPPET says everything must be done now and today, to me it beats the intelligence. The same KUPPET are talking about the teachers who are majority interns also, to be employed and employed on pensionable the pensionable scheme. But when the government realized, and through the president, he said that we will increase it from whatever amount they were getting to 75,000. And that meant anyone who is earning 75,000 shillings, which was untaxed, as a matter of fact, because it's coming as a stipend. 75,000 shillings is actually good money to start with.
Right.
When you were jobless and you had no opportunity, but the government has encouraged, go to the nearest place, nearest hospital, offer your services, or talk to the whatever ministry of health that is there. Either it's through the county or, you know, and get yourself busy. 75,000 is waiting for you. I think they would have gone for it for the next 1 year. It's about to end. They're on strike, but it's ending in the next 3-4 months.
Yes.
So I think if we apply some little bit of wisdom, then I think they would wait until next year and see what the 75,000 shillings. But if we are crying with a mouth full of you know, food in the mouth and we are still clamoring for more, the one in the mouth will actually choke us.
Right.
And that's what's going to happen for the Kuppet. The
Right.
Kuppet strike is good, they have their rights, but I think they should sit back and not just do some chest thumping. If it becomes so histrionic, Kenyans will not really take them seriously.
Right, so as we wrap this conversation up, Mwito, you know, with the cabinet, the new cabinet that came in last month, in the month of August, I'd give them about 3 weeks since they were in office. And, you know, they came into office with a lot of expectations, high for that matter, from Kenyans on, you know, get to office, get down to work, start changing things as much as you can. Let us feel, you know, that effect of a new person in office. As we wrap this conversation, have they been able to do that? I know it's ridiculously a bit early to be able to gauge what they've really done, but coming into office at that particular time, at that kind of moment, with the kind of momentum in the country, have they been able to cause some bit of stir and just make things move and roll in their various offices?
Well, the hurdle that the president and his government had to face was criticism from day one, with no reason really substantial. But since the opposition, led by the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, knew that his support will listen to him and follow him like a religion, he actually commandeered them into criticizing the government, get into riots that started as early as, I think, 3 months or 4 months after the institution of this new government. Yet the government itself has not even, has started rolling. It's actually setting itself up for the duty. And there you are declaring wameshindwa na kazi. It's like you get employed by EBN, and from day one, we find ourselves reasons to say why the chairman should sack you, you know, and have a replacement. You as a presenter would definitely get confused and wobble here and there until you gain a footing and learn to shed off some of these things, and which is what the president has done. He has been hardened by the riots and the criticisms that has taken place and hampered the service to the people with the many riots that we had. And I do believe that the exit of Raila Odinga, some of us, especially somebody like me personally, I would say, in my view, there would be quite some relief, because anyone who had the power to offer command and it's obeyed, to the latter was Raila Odinga. You know, whether he was preying on their understanding or ignorance, he knew what he took advantage of, and he made good of that. You know, I had them say, akiniambia nifukuze bibi, mimi nitafukuza bibi. So that's the level we're talking about kule chini. The people who are in the streets. This is the kind of rage and anger. If you incite such a one, you can imagine what kind of animosity you're going to face as a leader in government. And I believe the president has had it. The Gen Z thing is awakening. The president is engaging, and I do believe he'll be able to. He's smart enough to know where he's been misled or misguided. And at the moment, the campaigns that you're seeing him do in Western Kenya is to win the Western or the Luhya support. So that's tribal. It's to win the Luo support. You get the point? Then he goes to Kisii to win the Kisii support. We cannot avert that kind of, politics. It's there with us and there with us to stay. It starts from home, from individual to family to, village to constituency to wherever, and we get to the region and become national. Right. And the president has a duty to lead the whole country. Unlike his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua, he is a personal assistant. A personal assistant is where he is directed or ordered by his boss to go to. So he was told to deal with coffee, like I explained to you. He will not go to Northeastern. He'll go to Mount Kenya and Kericho and other areas that have got coffee and Ukambani. And that's how this thing is. He is just being obedient to his boss.
Right. So we're out of time, which I'd love to wrap this conversation up. Maybe in a minute, final word in just a minute.
I would encourage Kenyans to develop an interest to understand what's happening around them, away from these foreign football leagues that have actually taken up our generation from 50 years and below. But I'm not among them, and I have never been. Once we emancipate ourselves from that kind of bondage, they could be making money from this football thing, but it keeps them away from thinking about what is happening. Yet they expect whatever they raise as a grievance to be understood and actually addressed. Yet you did not even take time to understand what you are raising as a grievance. We had the finance bill. We hadn't read it. We didn't know even the procedures of parliament, that some of these things were actually in waiting to be deleted because they're already marked for deletion. We ought to have understood it, but it would be deleted at the third stage. These are some of the things that we need to be educated about and understand. But if the time for news, the generation which ought to understand and advise, and that includes the Gen Zs plus the millennial and everybody else, from 50 and below, are actually waiting for the sports segment so that they can see whether Manchester United or any other team has actually, won or something. You listen to this kind of discussion, to me it sounds moronic. And I'm saying Kenyans should now change and get to serious matters. Read the dailies, listen to the news as your favorite program, learn the constitution, understand the systems of the government if you want to talk about the government. And since you are a voter, you're actually obligated and compelled to understand these things with a very undivided focus.
All right, thank you very much, Muto Mureithi, who's a political analyst and commentator, for coming in this morning. Just to weigh in on the two main issues that we have been talking about this morning, that is on the 2010 Constitution, 14 years of it, where are we getting it right, where are we getting it wrong, as well as on the country's state of affairs. Misplaced priorities is the headline on the Standard this morning, particularly with what is ailing the nation. Previously, I believe it was either the nation or the Standard. They called us a striking nation, and so that is where we are, because there's an teachers strike. The aviation workers union were to start striking today, but they didn't strike that, and so the university's academic staff are also on strike. So quite conversations starter that are happening across the country. I hope that you're adequately informed this morning. Thank you for your wonderful company. Thank you for watching. Do enjoy the rest of your program this morning. My name is Cynthia Nanjala. Blessed day.